Hey guys, welcome back to the Fit Dad Club podcast. My name is Jason Barrett and I'm going to be your host this week. And the topic I wanted to talk about this week was something that gets thrown around a lot when it comes to health and fitness and when it comes to guys trying to achieve a body transformation, which is, it's just one day, it's just one meal, it's just one weekend. How big of an impact can it make? And when I'm talking about this, I'm really talking about the just one weekends that are never just one weekend. There's always something on. There's always a birthday party. There's always a anniversary. There's Easter. There's Christmas. There's all sorts of events and all sorts of things. And sometimes it's just the weekend itself. Now, it's a kind of a similar issue to when you're working FIFO. And we've talked about that a little bit in the FIFO episode a few episodes back. But you've essentially got an entire week, which is a weekend, if you're working, let's say 1 week on, 1 week off, or 2 weeks on, 1 week off, whatever. There's essentially a huge amount of time where it's unstructured. And that's the biggest issue for most people when it comes to their weekends, is that their weekends are unstructured, whereas their weeks are generally really well structured. You've got work, right? You've got a time, more often than not, you've got a time that you've got to be awake. You've got a time you've got to be out the house. You've got an allocated lunch break, and you've got, either you're cooking dinner or your wife's cooking dinner or whatever. And you've got to get the kids to bed, and it's, you've got very limited time because you've got a lot more structure. You often have things on the weeknight evenings, whether it's like kids' sports or after school activities or whatever. Like, you've got shit to do. And a lot of people, when it comes to the weekend, don't have as much shit to do. Like there's a bit more, and you might have, again, some more sport stuff. You might have some, birthday parties or whatever, but it's like in general from a meal and health and fitness perspective, but also from like a motivation perspective. It's not like you're at work for 8 hours getting shit done in a sort of more focused mindset. It's just kind of like, oh, what do we want to do today? Oh, maybe I've got to mow the lawn or do some gardening or something like that. And then you're not really giving a lot of thought and a lot of intention to your meals and your movement, which is why for a lot of our guys, we recommend at least scheduling one of their gym sessions or workouts or runs or whatever on the weekend. So they've got something that's being done on the weekend that's not just like, oh, I can sit around the house and kind of snack or have a bit of this, a bit of that. Oh, what are we going to do? And then all of a sudden it's, 1 o'clock. All you've done is snack around the house. Now you're hungry, and then you're going to binge eat for a little bit. And then you're going to go out to dinner that night and eat some more. And you haven't really done any movement, right? That's how a lot of people's weekends go. So you've got to be intentional with your weekends. You've got to be structured with your weekends, because without the normal structure of work, it just falls apart and you just end up making decisions by default instead of by design. And it doesn't take that much effort. It doesn't take that much focus to structure your weekends. You just consider them like a fucking work day. When it comes to breakfast, you do the same sort of thing. Yes, you might get to sleep in a little bit more depending on if you've got kids, because that, or depending on what age your kids are, because depending on that, they might wake you up or they might let you sleep in. But normally you're going to be up at a similar sort of time. So do breakfast the same sort of way as you would for your weekday, especially when you're doing some kind of, when you're looking to do a body transformation or lose some fat. Do your breakfast the same kind of way. Plan your lunch to be the same sort of thing. People chase variety on the weekends, and they chase, oh, I've got to do something different. Well, no, you don't have to do anything different from a meal perspective. You might have it a little bit easier, but have a set time roughly that you're going to be having lunch, because oftentimes you can leave it go a little bit too late, and then, oh, fuck, we've got to head out in 10 minutes. I don't have time to eat lunch. Oh, we'll just grab something on the way. Oh, we'll just go past Macca's, or we'll go past Hungry Jack's or KFC or whatever. And then, guess what? You end up doing that a couple more times throughout the day, or you end up getting, oh, I'm a bit hungry now because I left it a bit too late. Now let me get a Big Mac meal with the fucking full sugar Coke and ice cream and whatever. You leave it too late, you end up overdoing it. And this is the big thing that you need to understand is, what are your sort of typical habits? Because during the week, you might have the habit where, you don't eat a big lunch because you're like, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm going to have like 3 pieces of chicken and some lettuce for lunch, and that's healthy. And then come, 4, 5 p.m., you get home, 6 p.m., whatever, you get home, dinner's not for another hour. You're starving because you've been starving yourself. And then your immediate response from feeling hunger is to then go, all right, cool, I'm going to make myself 3 grilled cheese sandwiches while I'm waiting for dinner. And then I'm going to eat a big dinner because, I was so hungry, even if you're not fucking hungry anymore. So you've got to start paying attention to your body's cues. You've got to start paying attention to your body's hunger signals, and you've got to be proactive with them, especially on the weekend, because if you have, you might have bacon and eggs or something in the morning, whatever, it's fine. And then, it goes for a little bit long. And then towards the afternoon, you end up getting some takeaway. You order some Uber Eats, or you haven't got anything in the house. You go to the shops, you get a couple of bags of chips as well. You crack one open, you start having some dip with it. And then all of a sudden you've eaten half a bag of Doritos and a full thing of French onion dip, and you don't feel any better. Right, you feel full, but you don't really feel any better because all you've eaten is carbs and a fatty dip, and that's it. And then it's like you're going to feel hungry again in a couple of hours' time because you haven't had anything of substance, you haven't had any fiber, and then you're going to overeat at dinner, and then it's like, oh fuck, here it comes again. So weekends need to be structured. Weekends need to be focused. They need to be planned, and it doesn't take that much planning. Yes, you can introduce a little bit more variety, but be intentional with what kind of variety you introduce on the weekend. Because yes, it's 2 out of 7 days, right? That's like, I think it's just about under, it's almost like 25%. It's a quarter of your week in essence, right? It's just over a quarter of your week. It's like 30% of your week. You can undo 5 days of a deficit. Let's say if your goal is to lose a kilo of fat, you need to be on average in a deficit of about 1,000 calories, a bit over 1,000 calories a day, right? Let's call it 1,000. So therefore, you need to be in a deficit of about 7,000 calories over the week. You do your deficit pretty well from from Monday to Thursday, even maybe Monday to Friday, right? But for a lot of people, it's Monday to Thursday, and then Friday, we haven't even talked about getting on the beers and having a couple drinks, and then it's just a weekend, so I get the chance to relax. But then how that affects your results is if you end up overeating by, let's say, and which is really easy to do, by about 500 to 1,000 calories on let's say 500 on Friday, 1,000 on Saturday, 1,000 on Sunday, because you've just kind of been not been paying attention to it. Unless you're really, really good at your tracking, and you have been tracking for a while, you're not going to know what the fuck those calories are, and you're going to realize how calorie dense those meals plus drinks are going to be. That's undone half your deficit. You're probably going to gain a bit of weight from the water weight from eating extra carbs and all that kind of stuff. It's not going to completely undo the weekend if it's only about 1,000 calories over, but for a lot of people, it's more than that. So you will undo half that week's worth of effort. So you've only essentially it's like you've done a deficit for 2 out of 7 days, right? Which means you're going to be losing weight. Oh, what would that be? Like maybe a couple hundred grams that week, like 200 grams of fat that week instead of a kilo that you've lost, because you wanted to have a bigger weekend, or because you just didn't plan your weekend. And that's fine every now and again. And when I say every now and again, I mean like once every 2 months. If you want to just crack this shit on the head and get rid of this body fat finally, right? Rather than this yo-yo dieting bullshit that a lot of people have been doing for so long. This up and down, up and down. It's like, if you want to be serious about this, because you don't need to do this forever. Like, you're just not like, I'm never going to be able to have beers. I'm never going to be able to drink again. I'm never going to be able to eat out again or have Maccas or whatever. It's like, no, you're just not going to be able to do that every single fucking weekend, which is not what you should want to do. You should want to be a little bit healthier. That's the whole reason you're listening to this podcast. You should want to lose the body fat and keep it off. Yes, you can do this kind of stuff. Let's say when you're in shred mode, it's like once every 2 months, once every month to 2 months, where you can have a weekend that's a little bit looser. I'm not talking like a full YOLO, fucking eat a whole pizza for dinner, bacon and egg buffet for breakfast, like that kind of weekend. I'd say like once every 3 to 6 months is where you could do something like that potentially. I still wouldn't do it that often, but it's like, hey, you could do it that often without it super impacting your results, as long as you're on point the rest of the time. But guess what? People do that. They'll have a full YOLO weekend. It's our anniversary weekend. We went away. We had a bunch of cocktails and wine, and we went to, had a digger station and all this food, and it was amazing, and dessert. And it was a 3-day weekend. Went from Friday through to Sunday. And okay, cool. You do that once. And then guess what? Next weekend, you're just a little bit looser because you're a bit hungover. You started the week a little bit off on the wrong foot. You didn't have as much food in the house because you guys were away for the weekend. And so you were playing catch up, and you weren't as in routine. So, you ended up being a little bit looser on that weekend. And then the next weekend, it's someone's birthday, or, one of the kids is going to a party. There's a couple of sausage rolls and pies floating around. And because I wasn't really organized, I just had a couple of those. And I've been pretty good lately, except for that one weekend, 2 weekends ago, but the one weekend ago as well. That was shit too. That's how it happens. And it's like, and then we've got, a Christmas in July party coming up, or we've got a work function, or, I've got to fly away for this or whatever. These things add up. So you can't just be fucking willy-nilly with your weekends in terms of having whatever you want whenever you want. like I said, maybe a big blowout weekend where you kind of just don't care or do whatever. And you can have those weekends and still stay within, like relatively within the lines, eating it around maintenance. You just got to not go in going, oh, I'm just going to eat and drink as much as I fucking possibly can. Be in touch with yourself and be in touch with, well, how much do I actually want to eat? And be in touch with your hunger. How much do I actually want to eat? How much do I actually want to have? How much do I actually want to drink right now? And I've noticed for a lot of my guys who have started to cut out a fair amount of drinking, there's now, when they're able to reintroduce drinking, they're able to reintroduce it intentionally, and they're doing a lot less of it because they're not going, oh, I'm just going to have like, 10 beers on the weekend or 10 beers on the evening. It's like, oh no, I'm going to have 2 or 3 and I feel pretty good at that. And I know that having more doesn't really help me. And it's just adding extra calories, but I have my little buzz. I'm feeling good. I'm going to stop at 2 or 3. Whereas before it might have been 10, 15 on the evening that they would have had. So you can reintroduce these things slowly and you can reintroduce them so you have them, but you're just not going to go back to the lifestyle of eating shit and drinking every single weekend. That's just not a lifestyle that you have to commit to not going back to that lifestyle. Because if you do go back to that lifestyle, you're going to go back to that old level of body fat. You go back to that old level of body fat and energy, you're going to be right in the same position you were before you started this, which is not having the energy that you want for your kids, not being there for them, not being able to move around with them, being too sluggish. I've chatted to some of our dads that were, the reason why they started was because would have a few too many beers and I'm sitting there. My kids would want to play like footy or kick to kick and want me to be involved with them. And I wasn't able to do it because I was just like too zonked out. Not passed out, but just like, you just got that buzz where you're like, oh, I'm just sitting down. I can't really be fucked getting up. You have that moment a little bit too often. Your kids stop asking you to play with them. And they only want you to play with them for a short period of time, right? They only want to hang out with you. Mum and dad are only so cool for so long before they don't want you to play with them at all. And if you don't take advantage of that, if you don't capitalize on those moments, you never fucking get them back. And what's more important, a couple of beers and being able to eat some pizza, or you being able to do that shit with your kids? And it's severe, but that's the dichotomy that's there. That's the choice that you have to make. And that's the level of choice you need to make, because too many of you too many guys are in this negative momentum where they're rolling down the hill and they can't stop, of just eating shit and drinking shit and not sort of taking control of their health and of their energy, which for me starts on the weekend, because either the weekend sets you up for a good week or it sets you up for a shit week, right? You can either use weekend as, oh, this is when I blow off the steam from last week's stress. And guess why was last week stressful? Because you blew off steam from the week before and then you were hungover or you were tired or you were groggy or you weren't feeling energized getting into the next week. And it's just like a rolling effect. So you've got to take control of your energy and your emotions. You've got to take control of your health, and that starts on the weekend. And it starts by realizing that not every single weekend needs to be a piss up. Not every single weekend needs to be this unplanned mess of takeaway and just throwing in together whatever you could find in the fridge to eat. You've got to be intentional about it, because those little weekends that have little things that you need to deal with and little events and little stuff, all of that adds up. And there's so fucking many of them. They sometimes come back to back to back, and you might not have full control over them. So you've either got to learn to be disciplined with those events in terms of like, I'm not going to order, the burger and the chips and have 3 beers. I'm probably going to get I might get the chicken wrap and get a salad on the side or whatever. Like, you might have to do that. Because guess what? This happens so frequently. If it happens once every 3 months, yeah, whatever, get a burger and chips, you're fine. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world. But it's when it happens every single weekend, and then little times and days in between, in the middle. Oh, but state of origin's on. Oh, it's the grand final. Oh, it's this and that. It's always fucking something. So you've got to take a serious look at your results and say, how committed have I been over the weekends? How committed have I been at the events that are coming up? How many events are actually coming up? If you don't know, ask your wife. She'll probably have a calendar and show you, hey, we've got all this shit on all these weekends. And just know what's going to happen so you can plan for it and so you can be intentional about it. Like I said, it's not giving it up forever. It's not that you're never going to be able to, go to a party and have a few drinks and let loose, or go to a wedding and do whatever. Like, be my guest. But you've just got to know how frequently those things are coming up and how big of an impact they can have on your results. Because after 10 weeks, you might only end up losing 2 kilos instead of having lost 10 kilos. And then you're going to be like, well, fuck, this isn't even working. Why am I even bothering doing this? I'm putting in all this effort. It's like, no, you're putting in like 60% of the effort by doing shit during the week and then not doing anything on the weekend. So don't give me the bullshit of, I'm putting in all this effort, because you're not, if that's the scenario that you're in. And if you're not in that scenario, then it's a good reminder for you that when you do hit your goal, the weekends don't become a free-for-all again, because that's what can sort of spike you back up. You've got to commit to a full new lifestyle. You've got to commit to, I'm the kind of dad who will, still stay consistent on the weekends and still eat the same sort of stuff. And, maybe with a little bit of variety for dinners or whatever, because we've got a bit more time. But it's not something that you need to be crazy about and like, I've got to have only chicken and rice on the weekend or whatever. You can be a bit more flexible, but it's not something where you're going to be eating pizza and burgers and shit every single weekend. That's just not a commit. That's not who you are anymore. I'm not going to be getting pissed every single weekend, because that's not who you are anymore. It's more of a rare occurrence than it is an every weekend kind of thing. If you want to maintain these results, you can go back to having a little bit of it once a month, once every 2 months. You can have those weekends, but if it's every other weekend, that shit starts to add up. And that shit starting to add up in really small amounts is how most guys gained a lot of their weight that they wanted to lose in the first place. It wasn't, I gained 10 kilos in 6 months. No, you gained 10 kilos over 2 years. And then you gained 20 kilos over 3 years. And it just crept and crept and crept on until you looked in the mirror and you finally had that realization of, fuck, I've got to do something about this, because it's not going to go away by itself. It's got to go away with intention. It's got to go away with me actively trying to lose it. It's a lot easier to put weight on than it is to take weight off, because you can put weight on without thinking about it, because that's how most people do it, mindlessly. They're not thinking about what's going in their mouth. They're not thinking about what they're doing on the weekend. They're not planning anything. They're just taking life as it comes. And as a result, they're feeling like they're always on the back foot. So start to get on the front foot. Get on the front foot with life. Get on the front foot with your health, and start taking and making decisions about your life, rather than letting life dictate what happens to you and you going, oh shit, well, I guess this is what I have to do now because this is what happened with life. No, you're in control of your life, right? So take control of it. And if you want some help taking control of it, head to fit-dad.club, book in a call with us. We'll have a chat about where you are right now, help you get to where you want to be, and we'll be able to support you in that journey. If you're a dad who wants to get fit for your kids, that's where we're at. Right, that's what we do. We help you do that. So if that's something that is of interest to you, feel free to let us know. Leave us a rating and review. Let us know if there's any topics that you'd love to see covered on the podcast. And I'll look forward to speaking to you guys next week. Until then, peace out.